Hi, I'm Valerie Englehart, and in this video I am going to be playing around with the Daniel Smith Watercolor Pigment Stick Lamp Black. In a previous video I played around with Imperial Purple, and I had so much fun with it that I wanted to immediately jump into another painting using another one of the pigment sticks that my husband got me for my birthday. So I pulled out some 140-pound cold press Arches watercolor paper, and to get the pigment to flow from my pigment stick, I am soaking it or dipping it in my water container where I rinse my brush. And the painting I'm working on today is like a little clown girl doll. And so right now I'm doing the little swirly bits of her rough collar. I don't have a preliminary sketch down. I want this to be expressive and fluid and just intuitive. So I'm just going in and going with the flow. Pun very much intended. Now, because I just went straight in, I do have to be very careful about my proportions. This is a 9 by 12 inch piece of paper, and I have a tendency to work big. And so I have to be very conscious when I'm setting in the main shapes to keep them in proportion to each other. Otherwise, I would lose many of the details off the edge of the paper. And luckily, I've gotten a lot better at that spatial placement. So everything actually really worked out to my liking with this piece. So those marks that I made before, I had originally intended them to be the eyes, and I decided after I put the rest of the head in, those look like where the eyebrows should be. So thankfully, just came down a little bit, put in some eyes. Now, what is a clown without it being kind of scary and off-putting? So I'm using my pigment stick to create like these tear lines coming out of her eyes. Now, I could do all of this in black and white and have it be fine, but I do want to bring in some red later and have this be a two-tone painting using the red to really pop some areas. I added just a couple lines to be the nostrils and a broken line for the mouth placement. I don't want to outline her lips because I am going to go in with red later. So really, when you're using a black pigment stick like this, I want to put the lines where like the dark values are going to be, or anything that's going to give me shape and form. The crease of the mouth is going to be the darkest value, and so that's why that's a black line, but not the edges of the lips. Now that I've got my drawing down, I have my round brush and I'm going in, grabbing some water and activating the pigment on my paper to spread it around. So now I'm creating my mid-tone values by dragging that pigment into the white areas of the paper. And because it's watercolor, and a lot of those lines are actually still wet, it's really easy to create shadows and form just by going in with a wet brush and moving things around. Being careful with the eye here, I want to give the impression of the iris, but that's not so important in this piece. I just need there to be the understanding that that's where eyes are and that they're looking off to the side, but they don't need to be perfect. This is a fun painting study. It just needs to have the spirit of what I'm trying to convey. And I mean that metaphorically. Wink. I don't have any haunted clown dolls. They're certainly not telling me to make this. All right, to give her head form, I have taken some of the pigment from her hair and dragged it onto her forehead, giving more shape to the face, and I even put a little shadow under her lip just by grabbing some of that pigment with my brush for the mouth line and just creating a nice soft curved brush stroke. And that is another little tip, is when working with the planes of the face, be mindful of their shapes. So when I'm doing like under the eyes or a cheek, those areas are rounded, so I'm using curved brush strokes. Now the ruffs of the collar, because of how they are folded, are going to have quite a bit of shadow, so I'm going in and, well, adding in that shadow. And this is just such a fun way to play around with painting techniques. I highly recommend it. I swear, almost every new thing I try, I'm like, oh, this is the new way I want to paint all the time, which is such an exciting way to feel. I just wanted to pop in real quick and ask, do you want to paint with bold, vibrant watercolor? Well, I teach you how to paint this beautiful, dare I say, elegant elephant using bright tube paints and lovely texture effects. Just go down to the link below, and it doesn't cost any money. Sign up and you get a free watercolor lesson along with the line art so you can follow along. Okay, back to the video. And welcome back. I am going into my medium cadmium red hue. And because I do want to have some of this pop out more, and so I'm starting with her hair, and that red is going to mix in with the black that is already on my paper, and that's going to create some shadow and make the color a little muddy, which this is kind of a little bit of a creepy melancholy painting. So I am completely on board with that vibrant red getting muddied up a bit. And I'm really enjoying the contrast of that red and the black and the white. But one word of caution is whenever something's a lot of fun or looks really cool, that can bring an unintended consequence of overdoing it. So be mindful of where you want to put those pops of color. So for this girl, she's going to have pom-poms on her hat and red hair. And I'm going to give her rosy red cheeks and rosy red lips and some red on the tip of her nose, just like a clown. But it's important not to go and put the red everywhere or it loses its impact. You also want to pay attention to the composition. So I don't want to put a lot of red on the edges. Now I did put red up at the top, but I feel like it makes sense. It helps create that line that's going down to her face, and it only happens in that one spot. I don't have red going in my lower corners. So think about your focal point. And for her nose, I'm just doing it nice, light, and just a little red dot. I think it's so cute. And then a light wash, so like her hair has a very thick, I think, cream consistency of the red versus the red consistency I'm using right now. I've added a lot of water, so it's more of a tea consistency. I want it to be a lighter tone. And it is reactivating some of that black paint that I've put on before with my pigment stick. And so those colors are bleeding and merging together, and that works for me. I like that a lot. It is such a cool effect that screams that this painting was done in watercolor. And that is the only screaming. I'm certainly not screaming. No one here is screaming. All right, I've lost a lot of the rough, so I have made my stick wet and am putting in the lines of the rough in some places. I find that this particular pigment stick dries out a lot faster than the Imperial Purple. The purple seemed to stay wet longer than this black. I am also using a different kind of paper. This is cold press, so it has a little bit of a tooth to it, which is great because it grabs at the stick more. You get more of those like dry brush skipping textures. So I wonder if the drying out of the stick is because of the pigment of the stick or because of the paper I used, or it even could be a combination of both. I guess I'll just have to paint more and find out. All right, now to put in her lips. Starting with the lower lip. Nice and round, but I don't want it to go all the way to the corners. And then I'm just eyeballing where to put in that upper lip, being mindful of the Cupid's bow so that it has the correct shape. And even though this is really cute, I find that the color is too bold on its own. So I do rinse my brush, dab off the excess moisture, and then I lift some of that pigment off to create some shine and variation to make that lip more delicate. Now, the other thing that you can do with a pigment stick is, and this is probably more along its intended use, is just use your brush on the stick itself and then use the pigment that you picked up with your brush and paint it on the paper. But I've got my stick again, and I want to accentuate those little like fluffy bits coming out of the sides of the hat. Pay attention to your values. You want to have some really deep, dark values if you are working with such a stark contrast as an idea. So there's a lot of white in this piece. Her face is incredibly white. The background's white. So having some areas that are really dark black will help give extra interest to the painting. I found that her hair was getting a little too pale, so I just go in with another coat of the cadmium red. And then lifting off some of the paint to create a little bit of a highlight. And then I'm even bringing some of that hair color into the cheek just to make that edge a bit more ambiguous. And here's the finished painting. If you liked what you saw, press that like button so I know to make more like this. And if you want to see more, subscribe because I make videos every Monday and Thursday. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time. Bye.